My name is Sue Downey. For those of you who don't know me, I am one of the vice presidents of the INA. My co-vice president, Helen McCarthy, is actually on the call as well. We're hosting this morning for our educational committee um, chairperson, sorry, Jen, who couldn't be here but sends her love and regard to everyone. And we are thrilled to have with us Dr. Sarah Nadimpalli. Did I say that right? I'm so bad. Um, who, Dr. Sarah, let's
Yeah,
just call her
or
that,
Sarah.
has
Sarah's
been,
best.
Sarah's best. Sarah has been working on working with nannies on a bunch of different sort of topics and projects, and I'm going to let her tell you all about herself. Just a couple housekeeping things. This is being recorded, so feel free to keep yourself off screen if you want, but if you are, just know that we're recording it for members. And if you have a question, I think Sarah wants a real dynamic session today, so I think you can take your lead from her. But if you are shy or whatever, type it in the chat box, and I'll make sure she gets it. And you can even send it to me privately, and I'll make sure that that we can get anything you want to say out there. So thanks so much, and I'm going to pass it off to you, Sarah.
Great. Thank you all so much for having me and being open to having this dialogue with someone who really is purely a parent. I had a moment on my Facebook group where I was like, did I actually do nannying? Because I was like a summer babysitter for several summers. And I did a lot of kind of tasks that seemed sort of in the nanny realm, but weren't. And then we decided that because I was under 21, like I really can't be defined as a nanny or so it's like this some of this gray area and some of these questions have been really lovely to work out with a supportive community where we can have a dialogue, where we can open up and really get to the root of what's going on in our current nanny parent climate. I've just had the absolute pleasure of working with many nannies for about 8 years, nannies and babysitters. I'm the primary parent at home. I really shoulder a lot of the childcare and domestic work, and that's another day discussion when we have our feminist talk. But I have been kept afloat by many caregivers throughout my career and life, and so have a lot of appreciation for that experience. And I got really curious about this problem of seeing sort of a couple different narratives unfolding, right? The parent narrative, the nanny narrative, and why, especially we see this friction unfolding in social media. And I have some hunches and theories about it that really are sort of data driven. If we can look at things from a descriptive, like kind of objective viewpoint, we can see sort of the roots of why the confusion is unfolding. And so we'll get into that in my talk. Before further ado, I just want to thank again INA for having me and creating this safe space for dialogue. I've felt so supported being an INA member and encourage anyone to come on board. Marcia Hall generously reviewed the course I created and provided feedback and kind of said, well, come on over here, Sarah, the curious parent, come on in the huddle and see what it's about. And it's okay if you get it wrong. And if you make some missteps, we're going to steer you in the right direction because we could have a lot of win-wins in collaborating with people who really are coming into the professional career nanny world a little bit green, a little bit clueless. But I always say, like, if I can't learn from a year of like, I don't know, now hundreds of expert nanny consults and diving deep into parent nanny topics, like no average parent is going to learn, right? So my whole goal is to help deliver those like key gems, the key things to do right for parents, and create, as other people sort of been telling me, sort of a bridge between the worlds. So without further ado, I'm going to get started. And yes, I would love to co-create this conversation together. Please type questions in the comments, anything that pops up. I'm going to ask for your responses. First of all, I would like to know where everyone is from. I'm in Rhode Island today. And so if you can just type like what state you're in and get a sense of where everybody's coming from, I'm going to pull up my slides and get started. Okay, Sue, do you want to read where folks are coming in from? Are they typing?
Yes, let me. Well, I'm in Philadelphia. Helen is
Okay.
in London. We just learned that Annabelle Annabella, I hope I'm saying your name right, is also in London. Shannon is from Chicago, which it's early in
Ah,
the morning there. Brooklyn, another board member, Austin McFarland, is here. She's in Raleigh, North Carolina. Very exciting.
great, great, great. Well, I cannot get this on presentation mode, but we will just go ahead and get started. So, I believe Austin is from My Girl Friday, right?
Yes,
Who
she is.
has like the greatest marketing of all time. I just like live for the
Exactly.
posts, right? They're
Her
so
job, yep.
hilarious.
Her
And
job
so,
descriptions are awesome.
yeah, and it sort of like draws you in. And that's sort of how I try to come about this talk to just get people in, right? So sometimes if you have a hook that like gives people what they want, inside you can give them what they need. So we'll talk about my course later, but like inside my course, it's all the nanny industry standards, it's all the things that are necessary. But my whole project here is to hook parents into this world. So how do we start by doing that, or address sort of some of these things I was talking about that are going on in social media and sometimes in person? So the first step would be to consider, okay, if parents don't know nanny industry standards or norms or culture yet, perhaps we can work on a way of opening a door while we protect our own boundaries and integrity. And I would like to know how someone coming again purely from that parent world might help that process. So I really appreciate you and your engagement as we move along. So I have a background in public health research and community health nursing. And as I was working on this project for the past year, my husband said, "You are doing CBPR again." And that's community based participatory research. So I'm not just this like random parent who's completely curious about nannies and parents. What I learned was that nannies are this hidden population, right? Your work is largely unseen. And there's these rich narratives unfolding in your culture, largely in the career professional culture, that people just don't know. It tends to be sort of like, sequestered sometimes, right? And I know you want more people to know, you want more visibility. We all want that. But I'm asking questions. Why is sort of this career professional nanny information, I guess, not accessed as much by parents? How can we make it more accessible? So in doing community-based participatory research, I worked with South Asians in New York City. I worked with the Southeast Asian refugee population and started telling their narratives, their stories. So I've always been interested from a research perspective in what do hidden populations have to say, and how are those narratives full of power and enrichment for us to all learn from. So a little bit of my research background influencing some of this work with parents and nannies. So, as I said, at any point in my career where I was successful, it was squarely because we had an incredible support person in the form of a nanny or a really great babysitter working with our home team. Um, there were times, though, when it was a real challenge to secure the support. I was that parent who called the nanny agency and heard the several $1,000 fee, especially when it was looking for a part-time job, right? So I was trying to place a part-time nanny with our family. And I thought, oh, well, I could pay these $3,000 or, use that towards my actual nanny budget. And, parents have this conversation a lot. And so I ended up doing the self-search. And I made all the mistakes. I moved too fast. I didn't always call references. I had couple situations where it was the high turnover. And I really found, and here's a picture of our the first nanny we worked with, Celie, with my son. She was sort of the golden nanny that we happened to stumble upon. And she was truly a career nanny who came in hitting the ground running, really knowing her nanny practice and really being that huge source of support. And I thought like every nanny was going to be like Celie. And so over these 8 years, I've sort of experienced almost like every sort of parent nanny setup you could imagine. So I've taken a pause from academia and I thought about these barriers to parents having to go to work and taking a bit of care of themselves. And I realized it really is boiling down to having that third set of hands, eyes, and heart in the home in the form of a great nanny. That is the differential. I say that it's an unreasonable request to ask two people, a partner, or one parent to have to do the entire parents work alone, right? So I really believe in the work that you do and the impact nannies can have. So I wondered, why does this self search, right? The care.coms, the carefinders, the Facebook groups, why is this so challenging? Even with seemingly decent tech tools, right? And Sitter City, things like that. There has to be a better way for parents and nannies to find each other and work productively together through self search. Agencies are phenomenal resources. They've taught me so much over this past year. And they're even calling me and saying, like, can you teach our parents? Can you sort of help onboard them even when I'm working with them on the placement? But we know the facts remain that only a small portion of parents are going to work with agencies. And then a lot of that narrative that's unfolding around parents and nannies, guess what? It's happening as a result of what's going on in the self-search circles. It's not necessarily driven by the career professional agency end, right? So how can we better equip and empower parents with the right tools to find and work with nannies who can provide quality care? How can we start making shifts in that self-search population, which are going to inevitably positively impact the agency and career professional search populations? So I jumped through all the social media posts and the comments. I called up Laura Brawley and several other of these nanny experts, Ask the Nanny, Angela Sutherland, who's here today, and several listed, and had them review some of the things I was working on and things I was thinking about in terms of serving parents, getting parents on board, bringing them over into this professional career nanny world, or at least using your standards that are all on point with domestic worker laws that are unfolding in several states, or just, cue parents up to the right way to work with a nanny. And I even happened to be on Mark Randolph's podcast this year, and he was really intrigued with this idea and this problem. So hopefully I'll be able to follow up with him, and would love to have any feedback for next steps, because he's making a lot of impact over there in Silicon Valley and mentoring people. So here's kind of what I found out. And this might seem simple to you, but I don't know if anyone's ever heard. Has anyone ever heard of the blind man and the elephant parable before? Well, all these sages, it's like an old Sufi sort of fable, are standing around an elephant and they're blindfolded, right? And each sage is describing a different part of the elephant that they're accessing or touching. And they're all describing a little bit of a different piece of the puzzle. And yet, when the blindfolds are taken off, it's the same thing. So we're all trying to figure out in-home caregiving, what are the standards? What are the expectations? Many of us want to know the right thing to do and practices, but we're all coming at it from a different narrative or different perspective. So that's sort of like the foundation, right, of trying to smooth over some of these dialogues, or to make things fit a little better, that we're just coming at it from different experiences, different pain points, different objectives, and different ways of solving the problem, which might be different from one of these circles to the next. All right, so I want to just pause here and see what you're thinking. If anyone's wanting to share any of their thoughts, and I'm going to just stop the share, because then I'm going to jump into a pretty big slide next on Dr. Sarah's little theories. Any questions about where I'm coming from this, or looking at the chat? Sue, maybe you can tell me if there's any questions.
Don't have any yet. So I think you can keep going for now, and I'll keep watching.
Okay, sounds good. All right, so here's the big slide where I really need you to guide me. So this slide, again, is really just Sarah, the researcher parents' hunches and theories, right? So from what I've observed qualitatively over the past year and all these methods I've described to you, I think that there's sort of a bell curve here, right? And the bell curve is representative of the entire nanny parent self-search population. So maybe I can make this a little bigger. Yes, okay. So this is where all I would hypothesize the nannies and parents, not only self-search, but we also have anybody, parent nanny, matching, looking, agency, anyone, right? So if under the bell curve is where we have all the data, And this is the middle, right? This is the mean. This is where most people cluster around. And this is what I really want to hear from you. I think, and on this side, ABC represents parents, right? DEF represents nannies, right? Like all the nanny population out there. And if we were doing this in a real way, you'd have a separate curve for parents and nannies. But I think most parents and nannies out there searching, okay, so 68% represent this CD area clustered around the middle, right? And you can, like, I want to hear, like, Sarah, I think C should be like 20%, or, and these are just regular standard deviations from the mean. You tell me, like, I think your numbers are off here. I think your hypothesis, I would love to hear where you think the adjustment should be, or where it might actually shake out. And we could figure this all out if care.com would fund a study for us, right? If we asked 2,000 of the parent nanny people actively searching out there, we could see where they actually fall under this bell curve. I really think that a good hefty portion of parents out there are well-meaning. They want to do the right thing. They want to see, you know, what this sort of like value in working with a nanny picture might shake out like, but they're not fully informed. They don't really know the standard nanny role. They don't know that like pay needs to bump up if you add in certain household tasks. They don't know that there really should be a limit on those outside tasks. They don't know sometimes that a nanny should have CPR certification. They don't know that you need to call references and ask specific questions. They are well-meaning, but not fully informed. So you tell me. So some people might say, no, Sarah, it's much less. It's like 10% and like 90% are kind of not quality. You let me know what you think. I would say then though, at the same time, and this is really important because a lot of people here in INA and the nanny's career professional are, I think, are going to fall over into this lower percentage category, right? Where we see professional career nannies, right? Like folks associated, and it might even be less than this, with INA, excellent intentions, fully informed, have all the information, are doing it all right. I think that's a low percent. I think that's only like 13% maybe of the actively searching sort of nanny population, or maybe not even actively searching, but the nanny population. I think the bulk of nannies out there, people who are saying that they're nannies, right? And we know they might not even be meeting those minimum standard nanny requirements that the INA has put out, and they might not actually be nannies. And that's part of the problem too, right? But if you can imagine, and I don't know if anybody's like got strong feelings about this, like you're totally off with your numbers, but a good portion, the overwhelming majority of people out there in the nanny search game are well-meaning, but not fully informed. We're all sort of like still got our blindfolds on, right, around the elephant. And then like you do have parents who are fully informed through working usually with an agency, or they've done a year of research like me. No, you don't have to do a research, but some parents will go online and piece together what they need to know. And you know, a lot of information is sort of scattered. So it's like you might have the search piece in one blog article, and then you may have to go find your work agreement in another place. You have to like piece it all together, but some parents will do that. When I was working with a nanny, I was living in Chicago. So that's a great, you know, nanny heavy city where people could just tell me right away what to do. Post it on a mom board. Okay, I want to work with a nanny. What are the things I got to do? And they listed out the nanny standards. Okay, done. We have a contract. We have, you know, relatively what we need to do. I didn't do everything perfectly, but that's for another talk. So you have that population, which again is a much smaller percent than what's the average, right? Then on the tail end, I think under this sort of community, you have like the folks on both sides that are just not representative of high quality. These are sort of the safety situations. These are maybe the malicious parent who's just grossly trying to work with a nanny in an inappropriate, disrespectful way that doesn't respect or is, you know, adheres to any kind of domestic worker standards, right? I think those people, sort of like the not so good parents and the not so great nannies to work with, are sort of in the minority. What do you think about these numbers? All right. So I don't know if anybody wants to share, or Sue, you want to comment on this as an expert in the field?
I'm not an expert. Shannon actually had a good question that I think is relevant. So she thinks the percentages look accurate, especially for first time parents, but was interested to know data on first time parents versus seasoned parents. And I am also curious about that and nannies that have worked for more than 5 years full time as nannies versus nannies that have little experience in the field or are switching over from a different profession. Like, do you think that affects this curve in percentages?
Right. So this is just, a hunch, a hypothesis. We'd have to get a little more specific and like testing. I mean, I thought like we don't even really know like what percentage of, you know, the nanny parent population, is a career professional nanny. And then like we don't even have like a real, maybe I'm wrong. I'll have to talk to Michelle Larona, like an instrument to like test. So what you would do is you would create like a survey and you would give it to all these nannies, and the career professional nannies would answer it in a certain way, right? And then you could tell, okay, like this percent is actually a career professional nanny, right? And like you could kind of use that survey to also say, well, an entry summer bridge level nanny has answered the survey in this sort of way. And that's when you could start to tell like how the populations are broken up. Now, you might think, Sarah, you don't need to get that specific. We just know, right, that probably the bulk of nannies out there are going to fall into this like entry summer bridge level nanny. That's what we see as parents. That's what we experience for the most part when we're doing a self search, right? It's only those parents who call the agency and then they start to say, oh, okay. And then sometimes they question it and they might not even like absorb the information, right? So how does this all relate to like not canceling parents, my clever hook to get you all here today? How can we in any way know to say the right things, right? Know to say the things that are falling in the minority or of knowledge, right? How can we even know to say that if we don't know it, right? And there's probably a more simple way to say that. But I think if we just sort of consider sometimes the bulk of people out there don't know. They just don't know. Off sometimes nannies themselves, right? The ones who are not plugged into the industry. And so I would love to deliver that huge part around the bell curve, right in the middle. I would love to deliver that population that I've worked so closely with in the 8 years, right? Over to you. I would love to say, how can I bring you into this world in a swift, simple way? And then hopefully they'll want to know more and they'll know where to ask the right questions. They'll know to call Sue Downey. They'll know to call Laura. They'll know to call Ask the Nanny, Angela Sutherland. They'll know to call then Nanny Kim Brown, right? They'll know. I mean, when I started this year ago, I didn't even know there were like expert nanny consultants. I didn't know Laura Brawley like offered that. I thought she had the contract and that's it. But I mean, probably parents have no clue that they can call up an expert nanny consult who's been seasoned in the field, who can walk you through, who can do it in, a way that's respectful of both sides. Like no one knows that exists, right? A large portion. So when you're seeing these things unfold, right? A lot of times online, maybe we can look at this lens and just say the bulk of people don't really know. And, encountering professional career nannies on carefinder sites, obviously it's rare if my numbers are sort of generally right? It's a rare thing. And sometimes when you do encounter the career professional nanny, parents are like, well, gosh, why does this nanny want all these things? And like, this doesn't make sense. And well, does it have to be this complicated? And it's almost like they just can't go there with the cognitive like task of that. But but parents need to know that they need to know some of these basic things, and they're not so surmountable that you can't learn. You can learn. We can bring you into this world. It's not this mysterious world, right? You can do these like bare minimum nanny industry standards that Laura helped me, put inside my course. Many of us agree that most parents are perhaps clueless regarding these cultures, but not ill-meaning. So it sounds like we can come to some agreement on that. I know everyone's quiet. I thought you guys would speak up a little more. Information, like I said, can be scattered for parents, right? It's all over the place. You're pulling all these pieces together. Parents largely do not do the basic screening that agencies do, that. And it seems a small percent of parents actually make their way to these organizations I was talking about. So if perhaps we can agree, so now we have a context, right, for understanding the nanny parent landscape, at least a hunch, at least a guess, right? We'd actually have to get data to tell us the truth, but there is something such as qualitative data, right? So for the past year, I've qualitative, well, you've been listening to nanny stories, nanny's experience. So qualitative data is the lived experience. Nannies have been telling me their lived experience. We really need a lived experience nanny study because it's absolutely fascinating. The kind of negotiation, the cognitive tasks, like all the things that you're doing in the home is very sophisticated. It's sophisticated work. And the literature is not showing your lives and experiences, which is something that nags at me from a researcher standpoint. But if we can generally agree, there's a relatively small percent of parents and nannies with less than ideal intentions behaviors, may we accept perhaps that a large percent or perhaps the majority of parents and some nannies are uninformed, yet perhaps teachable. So this could be good news, right? This could be good news. But parental clueless remains frustrating, right? And when I was talking to the great Laura Browley about this, she said, Sarah, a lot of times nannies have been treated poorly. They've lived decades in less than ideal situations, without respect, without basic nanny industry standards in place. And sometimes when a parent walks onto a message board and says something clueless, it can be really triggering. And I was like blown away by that. I mean, I had no idea, right? I didn't know the level of sometimes discrimination, harassment, and we studied discrimination with South Asians. So I had some idea of how this plays out among hidden populations. And so I thought that sometimes when we have that like large clueless parent population, when they say their things that they're going to say, that I know we all like put our hands to the forehead, and I do that now after my year. And it ends up eliciting a reactive response. Nannies being their own HR departments, their entire careers, I try to imagine, and I said this to Mark Randolph in this podcast, I said, these career professional nannies often sometimes with or without an agency, they have to go into the home and explain every single time to a new family how it works, what your industry standard is, all on their own, right? So I try to empathize and understand that. And that's something I'm trying to, bring all the other parents into pieces of this so they can understand too, right? Some of these kind of foundational demographic things that are playing out in the relationship online and offline. So most parents who do self-search do not encounter, again, like I said, career professional nannies. So we have a need for better social media representation of nannies to understand and see how they do. And over on Instagram, and I'm sure in some of the Facebook groups too, this is happening in a good, positive way. I'm so glad. There's always this brilliant career professional nanny who always posts in my Facebook group. And I'm always like, oh, I hope, and I don't want to say her name. I don't want to I don't know if it's okay with her or not, but I'm like, I always hope she posts. I hope she gives her insight because it's always so sophisticated and so detailed. I can really help parents take the first right steps, but you all have this deep lived knowledge, experience, and framework that needs to be brought down further into the parent population. And I hope to hopefully be a bridge for that. So like I said, you have some pretty sophisticated cognitive tasks in dealing with parents and children. Your work is a complex, hard job. It's an intensive workload. I always say it's the toughest job around. And on my blog, I said there's a dirty secret among parents that we whisper on the playground, like, I look forward to going to work, like my day job is easier. And you probably have heard that too. So in considering of all this, it's hard because when you feel like a parent says something and it elicits this reactivity, and conversely, this could be true with a parent. I've seen parents sort of react really negative and like have this like knee-jerk response to a reasonable thing that a nanny is saying, right? So, and in both situations, right, on both sides, the art of the pause is something I really like to use. If we pause, right, and take a deep breath and maybe say, is this a clueless parent, or is this like kind of a really malicious, like awful, off base, unsafe comment, right? So if we can just take the pause, resist the urge to react, and think, well, where in the bell curve might this person be at or coming from? And we'll talk a little bit about how to fight for the things we care about, but do it in a way that are going to let others like want to join you, right? So Laura, when I first started talking to her, I'm like, I want to join you. I want to be behind this. I see what parents are like doing it correctly. Like tell me the way. And when I kind of got some pushback feedback for some of my things that I came out with that like weren't landing right, or the marketing was just not on par with what sort of the professional career nanny frameworks and dialogue looks like. Laura would always say, this is why you're getting this pushback. This is why. And so it's very helpful to have someone who can take that pause and can just lay out how it is, right? So as you've seen this before, classic scenario, and I don't want to keep people too long. I want to hear from you. So the coolest I remember a dad walked onto a message board, right? Could be a joke. And isn't sure why a nanny candidate is upset because the family's like, can you also like chop the family vegetables every week? And this guy, oh my gosh, he got like eviscerated. This is like, you're asking them to do a household chore that's not, and just, this is why it's so awful these days between parents and nannies, because parents have these expectations. And I was just like, oh, I can feel this dad. Like I can see what he's saying. And so, I just sort of wrote, and I think one other person wrote, like, this is what's included in the standard nanny role. You can find this in the International Nanny Association definitions. And if you, would like anything outside of that, and just sort of like laying it out. And when we sort of come at, either on either side of the equation, it just drives people away from the narrative, right? Away from the dialogue, away from the conversation. And so that's just not going to work in the favor of, right, building this knowledge that's so desperately needed among those 70%. So solutions are, is if you find yourself triggered as a parent or a nanny, take a pause, like I said, walk away. If you sense a negative emotion bubbling up, maybe you need to talk to someone, right? Maybe you can discuss it in a safe mom nanny circle. I know there's awesome like mentoring circles that you all have. I love that idea of like nannies finding each other and working this out together. And this exchange will probably not make you feel better or be productive in the long run. If you feel you can or want to offer something constructive, you can simply you can point out, and you will sound like, like I said, this professional nanny who's always commenting on my stuff. It's like, she is just like the smartest person in the room, right? And you want to like gravitate to her. You want to follow her and what she's saying, because it's so on point. And recognize, like, it is not your job, and I think Sue said this in the podcast, to fix it is not your job, anybody here, to fix every clueless parent or that huge bulk of the population. I'm just presenting things to think about, to hopefully dialogue about, or fight every battle, right? We need to see structural shifts, right? Changes in culture that can take time. So systemic changes are things like engaging with bodies like the INA, mentoring groups, changing laws, bills through aligning with the DWA, Domestic Workers Alliance. So those are kind of more like cultural shifts, structural shifts that are really needed. And I understand that. And I haven't dived deep too much into that. I'm still focused on kind of this individual intervention that may really help parents and provide this like sweeping basic knowledge that huge population right under the bell curve needs. So we need for unity among nanny organizations and potentially a common agenda. Like, what's one thing that you really want to work on this year? Like, do you want, to, bump everybody from being 70 or 80% on the books to like, or off the books to like, 50% of people are on the books? Like, what, or do you really want the bulk of parents to just know those nanny industry standards? Like, maybe that's what you really hit home. So there's a lot of like little bits of information being like taught out there, but like perhaps if they're, we're sort of just like an agenda for like, we're going to work on this one thing this year for folks in that sort of clueless community to get, like, let's do that. So we've got to think of, be creative together and look at systematic changes as parents and nannies. This was a lot of information. I'm curious if anyone wants to be brave. I see some questions. I'm going to pause right here. I see people smiling, so that's good.
So you have a couple of interesting comments, and then I see Misha's name is up, although I always say her name wrong, but she knows I love her. Jenna commented in the chat. I'm going to paraphrase a little, but she's an agency owner and sees two big things that almost every parent is sort of missing. And one is understanding the consistent paycheck, which is, as we know in the nanny circle, guaranteed hours. And then second is that nannying is a job and the parent has to be the employer, which means that you have to train and support the nanny, and create a workplace for the nanny, not just somebody who can go with the flow. Kind of every nanny's heard that description a million times, right? Which is like code for I'm not going to complain no matter what you do to me. Or what you throw at me. It's not really due to me. It's what you throw at me. I'm not going to complain. So Jenna made that comment, and Sarah also is a agency, and she commented that parents are more receptive to her guidance now that she's a small agency owner rather than when she was interviewing and working as a nanny for years. So the parents that come through the agency are willing to learn. And the parents that she interviewed with as a nanny in Brooklyn didn't want her feedback or suggestions. So that's an interesting little bit. Annabelle, I'll get back to you in just a second. So I don't know if you want to comment on like the role of an agency versus a nanny. Like that seems to be.
So a quick comment, and what I'll show you in a minute is I've learned that agencies are taking their very valuable consulting time and explaining the same basic, and what you're saying is very basic, Gina, right? Like parents should know this is an employee in your home. It's an employee-employer relationship. A nanny has a livelihood. She has rent to pay or a mortgage, and these are very basic things that parents just don't know. And so agencies keep calling me and saying, well, can we collaborate here and help educate parents? And what I'll show you in a minute is this, a course that can teach them the same basic information without you having to use your consulting time over and over and over again, right? So what I'm looking for is sort of that systematic, like if they just take this first right step, if they just absorb this knowledge before they work with an agency, like think about how much easier your job would be. That would be like my solution versus this sort of just one-to-one consult, right? So that would be more of a sort of hopefully widespread solution. And I mean, I do think it's unique that like I can talk like parent to parent, right? So I've been in your shoes. I'm not a professional nanny. I'm not in this nanny world, but I learned, and you can learn too. And, sometimes, my husband always gets mad at me when he's like, why don't you believe me when I tell you this? You always have to ask 2 more people. And I'm like, well, I need like consensus between 3 different people. So I think like hearing sort of these same baseline things over and over can be impactful. And I'm sorry if I'm not like getting to all the specifics, but I really appreciate these comments. Yes, parents want to be fair employers, but they're just not familiar. I find parents more receptive to my, yes. So I've heard that there is a little bit of a tide is turning, that parents are becoming a little better about like hearing this. Do you all find that true, or are we like getting back into the dark ages? So
Hi,
thanks for sharing that. Yes, go
hi,
ahead.
Hi, everyone. I'm sorry I'm not on video. I have my two children here with me this morning. So,
No problem.
yeah, I'm just so happy to be here. I'm very interested in kind of what's happening in the industry right now. Just to give a little background, I have a small agency here in Chicago. I am a mother, and we also employ a full-time nanny. And I was previously an au pair in what feels like another life. So I started my agency kind of right before Chicago shut down for the pandemic. So a very interesting time. And I, like Sarah mentioned, I've been seeing the friction, namely on Instagram, and am both intimidated by it and, weird to say, but kind of excited by it, because it's great to see this industry, having a voice and kind of trying to turn the tides a little bit. To answer your question, I think that, speaking as an agency owner, obviously I work with a certain type of parent who, I believe, if you are wanting to work with an agency, you're kind of coming from a place of wanting to be educated already, and open to kind of hearing what industry standards are. But what I've seen as an agency owner is there does seem to be a collective awareness of what is happening. I've heard parents call it like the nanny uprising, the nanny revolt, all of this. So I definitely am finding that they are coming to me with the knowledge that, like, we get it. We know we need to be competitive. We know we need to be fast. We know the women in this industry are, they deserve paid time off, they deserve W-2 positions. Like, we know all those things, which is exciting to see. But I think also I launched my agency at a very interesting time. So I'm excited to see, what you're doing and what's happening, because I think that parents, regardless of whether they want to use an agency or they want to do the self-search, should have the access and the tools and the knowledge to provide a stable working environment for these women. So and men, I'm very, very excited to be here, and I'm, excited to hear everything, and I'm excited to learn.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing that. Matches has a comment.
Yeah, hi, good morning, everyone. I'm so excited to be here. And Sarah, thank you for all the work you're doing. And also, I want to invite you, Sarah, to be, if I don't know if you know about the organization called Hand in Hand, the domestic workers employers. And they are an organization that organize employers, and they are doing stuff like you. They have this campaign that I love. Here, I don't know if you can see it. My home is someone else's workplace.
That's
Because
great.
they want to educate parents and all the employees and domestic workers that their house is someone else's workplace, and they have to, like, how you would like, the meaning is like, why you would like to have in your workplace, you see. And that's what we try to educate employers about, what the nannies and the house cleaners and the caregivers we like to have in the workplace. And it's really an amazing organization, because they give you the space to, for example, for me, last week I was in a meeting with a lot of employers of parents and nannies, and saying to them, don't tell them nannies you are part of the family. Because we have that limited, because so many of us don't like that terms. Because
That's right. Yeah.
To tell us, oh, you are part of the family, and the way you treat us is not the way. And then that's an amazing organization that maybe if you want, I can give you the information, because it's a national organization. They organize employers all over the country, and it's really amazing. And they're doing an amazing job. Thank you.
Oh, that's such a great resource. Thank you, Matches. And I just want to thank Matches. She came on my Instagram live. I do this little series called What is Your Nanny Practice, right? And so I sort of I think Laura Brawley talks to us about like, what's your nanny philosophy, right? What I've seen as like a nurse, right? Nurses kind of practice a little differently, so do physicians, and like nannies kind of can make choices about how they want to practice under that standard nanny, that umbrella. Like there are choices, right? And sometimes we see that online too, is like nannies kind of called out for the way they're practicing, or, even if it's all like on point with nanny industry standards. Like, I'm glad you brought that up about like, you're a member of the family. Like nannies are really working hard on their boundaries and having a clear work agreement. And so I can see how that might blur boundaries and like, take a step back from maybe what has been said in the past. But then some other nannies really like a certain closeness with families. It may unfold over time. And so like, I try to think that, everybody has the freedom to practice a little bit differently within sort of those, umbrella standards. And Mr. Chris, who's here, is just one of the most lovely nannies ever. Sorry, I had to call you out, but he's an English nanny who showed his very lovely and very sort of like even nanny practice with me. So he just sort of like, he's like the parent whisperer, I think. Like he sort of just described this way that he does all those like, sort of like negotiations with parents and guiding them and getting them right to where he sort of needs them, and everybody works well. I mean, am I saying it right, Chris?
I mean, that's how I feel like I approach things anyway. But like, hi everyone, sorry I was late. I had some technical issues. Love all the work and all the graph, by the way, and I'm really excited to be part of this conversation. But yeah, I find it's that balance between the nanny and the family friend is also a fascinating one. So I'm trying not to go too off topic because I want to stay on the like, let's not cats or parents topic. But yeah, it's I found very quickly from being, I went straight, I've been nannying for like 10, 12 years, and I was a live-in nanny straight away. And I found from my very first family, it was like, okay, how do I negotiate this balance between taking care of myself, but also being like a family friend? And I know some nannies really don't like, we're not family, I'm an employee, and that's great. And I know some like nannies are like, I just want to be a friend who goes round and is invited to birthday parties, and that's also great too. And I find it's just finding that balance in the middle, if that makes sense. So I have this just this kind of strong, stern kind of boundaries.
You do, yeah.
But with flexibility there. And I feel like if we can try and get that towards the parents, because the amount of I see on different forums from parents and their nannies is they were the wonderful family for years and years and years, and suddenly the nanny will ask for a raise and boundaries break, and that's it, they're looking for a new job. And it's so sad to see something that was an easy conversation or maybe even an awkward conversation just could have happened and things might have been okay.
Well, and that's so to the point, because to me, a lot of this conversation is, it's complicated in a way that it isn't for other professions, because there's not one standard kind of nanny. There's not one standard kind of best relationship with the family. There's a million different ways that you can do this job and be successful. It's just like even the definition of nanny isn't clear to parents versus like a babysitter. I mean, you ask what the difference, and most nannies can't even articulate that. So on top of trying to explain all of this stuff, we have to define ourselves, and like it's just constantly, I think that's very to the point actually, is that there's so many different ways. I want to Annabella, I hope I'm saying your name right, commented about a job interview where once she went and the mom said, do you roll your eyes? And she was like, why are you asking me this question? And the nanny that had been interviewed previously had left her exasperated, and so she just sort of put on her Mona Lisa face, which I love that, and went through the rest of it and thought in her head, red flag, like, why should I be worried about rolling my eyes? I thought that was a good story, because oftentimes you're in the interview and you're thinking about all these different things, and now you're trying to explain guaranteed hours, or it just makes it really hard.
Yeah, and I like the point you brought up, Sue, about, these sort of self-search sites, like, advertising as if, nannies are accessible by everyone. And we know this is the most luxury form of childcare. And all these nanny experts I've been talking to over the past year, I'm like, man, I wish I could afford you. Like, you would be the perfect nanny. But there is a certain budget that you have to start with. And that's actually what I teach parents to do, is start with your budget and know that obviously I lay out the difference between a career professional nanny and the entry self-search. Now you can, and this is, I don't want to digress too much, but you can work with a really great entry summer nanny. It just takes a little more kind of like onboarding, a more of an intensive trial period. I've worked with great folks like that. And like those sort of like bridge summer nannies did fall in my budget. Or, I really talk to parents about like budgeting for a nanny. So like maybe you go out to dinner 2 times less a month, and then you have like a secure 3 hours a week with a babysitter or a nanny because you need that break to yourself. And so before I kind of, and this is such a great conversation, thank you all. But before I kind of move on to sort of the last piece of my presentation, and I just totally lost my thought. Yeah, just starting off about budget. And so this is what I want to say. So you'll probably see some stuff rolling out where we're like, right, so we know this big problem exists, we need to hook parents better. And so this is like a big sort of like tapping into the parent pain point, right? So what I want to try to do with some of my marketing, now that I've spent this year grounded and rooted in the professional nanny, expert nanny culture, we got to find ways to entice parents to come and do the right thing, right? And I lay that out for them in the course I'm going to show you. But some of those things are that I'm hearing from the parent pain points are they're just not like getting over some of this guilt, right? They're like shaky new parent, that how could I trust this like a person who's not my family to come in? So I really want to like touch on that with parents, is how we can trust and then screen and feel comfortable after things like trial periods, and how much like nannies changed me. So, I mean, it's like I have those unique stories of nobody in my family could handle my super clinical definition of colic baby screaming up every 40 minutes. Nobody could. Everyone who tried to hold him and comfort him had the look of terror in their eyes. I'll never forget it. Like my mother-in-law was supposed to be this like, oh shoot, this is recorded. But she was supposed to be this like really like adept person at dealing with babies, and that just didn't happen. And so I was like, I gotta get someone in here. And it was so hard to just go on to like care.com and think, oh my gosh, I'm just like shooting an arrow at somebody, in any direction for someone to come help me. But I'll never forget that nanny Bina came in, and Bina just looked me in the eye and it's like, I got this. Like, this is Sarah, he's fine. Look at how cute he is. And like pointing out his positive characteristics. I mean, she was like the only one in my life to do that for me. And so like I want to like share the power of nannies and support and like do it the right way with other parents. So sort of an aside, but I want to finish up because everybody's been so great and hanging around till the end. But so my whole strategy here is based on an online course I developed, again with all those nanny experts that I had told you about. And I developed roughly about 6 months ago the Same Team online course. So in this, I deliver that sound basic knowledge and action steps to that overwhelming majority of parents who have no clue parent to parent. So this is an online course you can access anytime, anywhere. The course right now, if parents take it, it's about an hour and a half. I may make a mini version of it because I'm hearing feedback that maybe an hour and a half is too much, which I find unfathomable, right? But you can take it in under a couple hours. We have these specific curriculum and action steps. And I'm going to just take you right to my website here. And again, this is trying to hook parents into the conversation and really targeting them on how nannies can relieve their pain points and bring so much value. So if you go to Same Team Childcare, you can either like enroll in the course here, and I want to just show you the outline. So I present like this basic framework. This is probably the most important module. It's like 14 minutes, right? So I cover nanny industry standards from Laura Brawley. I encourage parents to write down their needs and wishes, and then talking about that nanny practice and how we can match those two together to look for the right matches. When I talk about fostering the best parent-nanny relationships, I show Nanny Kim Brown and I doing these scenarios. Like, some people are like, I nearly fell over when you were doing the parent guilt scenario or talking about a work agreement scenario. I mean, we go deep, and like, actually these scenarios brought up a lot of feelings for Nanny Kim and I on both sides. I go over those critical nanny search, hire, onboarding steps, put them all in one place. I do have a work agreement in there that's sort of based on the average parent needs, but it can be adjusted, and you go through every item together. After you do sort of my work agreement, which, and the way I define it is sort of like what that daily life is going to look like between parent and nanny, really specifically the nanny's role. And then I want to send them over just for the most thorough, just to make sure I got everything. In my mind, that was Laura Brawley's contract. So I have that in there. So these 3 action steps that parents just must take. You got to know what you're looking for, right? You're going to work through my checklist or that work agreement. And then there's just like a little 25 question quiz in there to make sure that everybody is on the same page. And let's just finish up here. So you will, right. So that's what the course is. So my thought is to change this culture, to get this like information out there. And if like agencies want to be affiliates, so there's like a whole paid affiliate process where like if someone uses your nanny code, you get like 30% of that sale. And so it could be a nice source of passive income for agencies as well. I've made it a mission to try to reach as many parents as I can and integrate these nuances and points of view that are often that are held sort of in this a little bit of an ivory tower, right? I come from academia, we have our own ivory tower, right? But I think there's a big job to really, and we need many people working on this, and so many of you are, but like to get this information out and down in the carefinder sites. So just for today, this is inside the course, and you'll have a little, sampling of all what's going on here. I really want parents to buy this, okay? I want them to take this initiative to say, okay, I need this framework even before I'm thinking about working with a nanny. But as Mark Randolph in the podcast told me, he's like, you want nannies to see it and to be able to get value out of it. It might give you some guides on how to approach a parent. When you buy one course, you get a second course free. So you get like 2 codes to view this course. So if you are just sort of at your wit's end, explaining the same things over and over to parents, try this. Maybe they'll see this. So for today, for the next like 24 hours, I want to give all the INA folks here 75% off. And in the replay, sorry guys, this coupon won't work, but from at noon tomorrow, I'll take the coupon off, but 75% off the course. If you go to enroll now at the top, it'll be 97, but trust me, you're going to want to go through the webinar. If you just, enter the webinar, 20 minutes in, you'll see a sort of a webinar deal that you'll want to use, and your 75% off code will work when you're in the webinar, if that makes sense. Just, and you can email me if you have any questions. So the code is just INA 75. If you want to check out the course, see if it's something you want to use in your agency for yourself, or like parents that you work with that you want to pass on to other parents. So a lot of times you're going to know all this knowledge, right? If you're a professional career nanny, but these darn parents won't. So if you'd like to have a parent in your HR corner, I would love to serve you through this Same Team online course and our growing community, and even just having your voice in the conversation. I would love that. And I talked about sort of like the affiliate link. You can check more out at sameteamchildcare.com. And that is it from my end, and loved mostly hearing from you. So happy to answer any more questions. I know we're probably at time. But however you want to take it, Sue, and thanks again for having me.
Yeah, no, we are at time. I will add on, I have one question, but I'm going to just add on this thing in case people have to bolt, that I totally think Sarah's program is amazing. However, another great thing that you could do as an INA member when these questions come up in the chat rooms is refer parents to the INA website. Yeah. We now have a landing page for parents that has a lot of these guaranteed hours explained. There's a a thing about a work agreement. There's permission to treat minors. There's all of these resources for parents. All you have to do is send them towards nanny.org and have them click on parents, and then you don't have to explain it. A course is better, but we don't have one of those yet. So if they're not willing to take a course, send them to the INA, and hopefully that's one thing that we can help. Thanks so much, Sarah. I'm going to let you answer this question if you have a few minutes. Annabella wanted to know if you had any advice about different ways to communicate if you're of a different generation. Some of us nannies are a little bit older, like me, working for families that are a generation younger than me, and explaining some of these to the generation that's having children right now, that can be a little challenging. We don't always speak the same language. Do you have any advice or thoughts on that?
That's a really good question. So I would say a lot of it depends on your nanny practice, right? So I know a lot of nannies who I guess might be considered like older generation nanny, but they're very modern, and like there's no real barrier sort of with my generation in talking to them. So maybe it's not, generation, but maybe if you have a very like traditional maybe nanny practice, and you're wanting to connect better with modern parents. I have to like revert, maybe it's just because he's sitting right here, but Chris just has this very clear, this is how it's going to work, but in a very kind of gentle but firm way. So, I mean, maybe this could be a whole webinar on how you can lay things out in a way that doesn't seem kind of like, just slamming down the hammer, or, but I guess I need to know a little more about like what the actual issue is. Like, what is like the modern parent pushing back against, like what is the issue? Like, do they just have different values than one another, or does that, I don't know if that answers the question, but just some ideas.
Okay, Jenna put something in the comment for you, Annabella, which I think is relevant. That's actually a great idea for another webinar. Maybe we could get you to come back, Sarah, and we could talk about because right now, so I'm 54. I just turned 54, and I'm now, like, this is my first job where I'm working for family that's 10, 15 years younger. It's the generation after me. So that's happening for a lot of nannies right now, and it is different. Like, I'm okay. I'm allowed to be on my cell phone all the time. Like, there are those kinds of differences, but it's also like in the role of parenting now, and just a lot. There's a lot there. But I think we would, I think I'm going to write this down, and we should have another webinar on this, because I think it's a huge topic, and we are a little bit over time now. So
yes, I do sort of see what you're saying more. Like, we have this, we're the helicopter parent generation, right? Like, how does a nanny who has been seasoned for many years, who can clearly handle it, like work with sort of the helicopter type parent? I mean, I think that's a really good question. And it would be a great scenario to see like played out. I'd love to like act that out with someone, and then, because I have those in my course and stuff. But so that's so many interesting things.
Parents have definitely changed. I mean, I've been a nanny. I'm a qualified British nanny, and I qualified in 1991. So I've been a nanny for over 30 years. And there's been some big changes. There's different theories. I mean, I hit 50 this year. And when you're working with parents who are now 20 years or more younger than you, it's very different. Whereas they were always older than I am. Now I'm older than them. And it's a very different world. And I think also it's very different between working. I mean, I've worked in America. Families over there, the whole nanny industry is very different in America than it is in the UK. And it's different in Europe, and it's very different around the world and everything. But I think it's a really interesting topic, and I agree, Sue. We've got to get you back, Sarah.
Nope, I'm going to put it right on the list for the education committee, and we'll definitely try to to do that. So if everybody's good, I will say thank you so much. Sarah, you sent that just to me. I'm going to.
Oh, oops.
It's okay. I'll just paste it into the chat. But everybody, if you want to get in touch with Sarah, I'm putting her information in the chat now. But also, you can contact the INA office, and we'll make sure to get you in touch. Thanks so much for your time. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody.
And thanks everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thanks,
And
everyone.
Thank you. Have a nice Sunday. Bye bye.
Bye.
No. Bye. No.